Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are going to be talking about something I think a lot of us are constantly looking for in our lives. Peace. And not just like the, surface level, everything is fine type of peace, but something a lot deeper.
Yeah, it's really about finding that inner peace and resilience to, kind of navigate the chaos of the world.
Exactly. So to really kind of dig into this idea, we're going to be looking at a YouTube podcast called Soul Space. Have you heard of it?
I have, yeah. The host really seems to get it when it comes to the struggles of finding peace. They've got some interesting ideas.
Yeah, I was drawn to it because they talk about peace as a practice and not a destination. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think that's a really crucial distinction. It's not about, achieving some perfect state of serenity. It's more about that ongoing process of cultivating inner peace. The host uses this great analogy. It's like building a shelter to weather any storm life throws at you.
I love that. It's so true, right? Like we spend so much time trying to control everything around us when that's just not possible. Instead, we should focus on building up our inner strength and resilience.
Right. And how often do you find yourself trying to, control those things that are really outside of your control? It can be so frustrating. And shifting that focus inward is so much more empowering.
So true. In one of their episodes, the Soul Space host suggests this simple breathing exercise. Just 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. They say it's a great way to bring yourself back to the present moment. What do you think? Have you found breathing exercises helpful?
Breathing exercises are incredibly powerful. Yeah, conscious breathing can really impact both our physical and mental states. It's a tool often used in therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy to help people manage anxiety and manage stress.
That makes sense. So it's not just some woo-woo thing. There's actual science behind it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the podcast also talks about letting go of all the shoulds we put on ourselves. Like all those societal expectations we face, like getting married, working 24/7, or even just like buying the latest gadgets, keeping up with the Joneses. That can create so much pressure and take us further away from peace.
Right, and a lot of those shoulds, they aren't even based on our own values and desires. They're often coming from external pressures. I think it's important for everyone to really explore where those expectations come from and how they might be impacting their peace of mind. Ask yourself, are these expectations really serving me? Or are they just adding to all the noise and chaos in my life?
That is such a good question for everyone listening to really consider. The Soul Space host made another point that really resonated with me. Peace isn't passive. It's an active choice we make.
I agree. It's about making conscious choices that align with our values and creating space for peace, even amidst the demands of the world. It's not always easy.
Yeah, it's definitely a practice. And sometimes that means challenging the picture-perfect image of peace that we often see.
Definitely. Like in the podcast, the host shares this story about a friend, Arab. He seems to have it all, a great job, a seemingly perfect family. But he confessed to the host that he cries every morning because he feels so trapped. And it's a good reminder that what we see on the surface isn't always the whole story.
That's so true. Especially with social media. It's like everyone's presenting this curated, perfect version of reality. It's easy to fall into that comparison trap and feel like we're not enough.
Oh, absolutely. Social comparison is a huge source of stress and anxiety for so many people. And, instead of focusing on what others have, how can we cultivate gratitude for what we do have? How can we celebrate our own unique journeys without getting caught up in that trap of comparison?
It's something I'm really trying to be more mindful of. And I've noticed when I spend less time, scrolling through social media and more time just appreciating what's around me, I do feel a lot more at peace.
Yeah, and another key piece of this journey towards peace is self-forgiveness. Holding on to past mistakes and regrets just weighs us down. The podcast host really emphasizes the importance of accepting ourselves as we are, flaws and all.
Makes you wonder, what's the psychological impact of holding on to all that guilt and shame?
Well, studies have shown that holding on to guilt can lead to all sorts of negative consequences, like increased anxiety, depression, and even physical health issues. It creates this negative feedback loop where we're constantly replaying our past mistakes and reinforcing those feelings of inadequacy.
So letting go of the past, even if it's painful, can actually be a key to experiencing more peace in the present.
Yes, exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all human, we all make mistakes, and we can choose to learn from those mistakes and move forward with compassion for ourselves and for others.
And I think that leads perfectly into the next part of our conversation, where we'll talk about how to anchor ourselves in peace.
So, in the Soul Space podcast, the host talks about how to actually, anchor ourselves in peace. And they have this idea of peace rituals.
Yeah, I was going to say those really stood out to me.
Like simple practices that you can do to help reconnect with yourself, find a sense of calm.
Right. And they don't have to be anything complicated. Like one example they give is enjoying a cup of chai out on the balcony every morning, or listening to your favorite music for like 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. It's about creating those moments of peace, no matter how busy life gets. I think even small acts like that, they can have a big impact on our overall well-being, like a cumulative effect.
The host also talks about connecting with your inner child, which I thought was really interesting. They suggest like asking yourself, what scared you as a child? And then offering comfort and reassurance to that younger version of yourself. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, inner child work is actually a therapeutic approach. A lot of therapists use this, and it explores how those early experiences we have shape our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors, even in adulthood.
Makes sense.
And by acknowledging and addressing any kind of unresolved emotional wounds that we might be carrying from our past, that's how we cultivate greater self-compassion, and that creates a more peaceful, internal landscape.
I like that. For me, I find that spending time in nature is so grounding. The Soul Space host talked about that too. Like how being in nature reminds us that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves.
Right. And research has shown that spending time outdoors, it can reduce stress hormones, lower blood pressure, improve your mood. It's almost like hitting the reset button on our nervous system.
Yeah. It's amazing how different things can bring us peace, right? What are some things that have stood out to you from the podcast episode so far?
I think, what really resonated with me was how the host emphasizes that, your approach to peace should be personal. It's about finding what works for you, right? Because what works for one person might not work for another. So it's about finding those activities and practices that truly nourish your soul and help you connect with that inner sense of calm.
Yeah, I agree. The Soul Space host also talks about setting boundaries and letting go of things that just drain our energy, like, toxic relationships, unhealthy habits, even just like negative thought patterns. Sometimes finding peace means saying no to protect our well-being.
Absolutely. Setting boundaries is essential for self-care. It's a way of prioritizing your needs and creating space for things that truly matter. And it's not selfish at all. It's actually an act of a self-preservation,
Of course, there are times when peace feels impossible, especially when we're going through difficult times, like a loss of a loved one or financial hardship or just feeling really lonely. And the host acknowledges that. They really emphasize self-compassion, especially during those tough times.
Yeah, it's so important. Like in those moments, we need to be gentle with ourselves. Recognize that it's okay to not be okay all the time.
Right.
And instead of, judging our emotions, we can just practice being present with them.
And they also talk about the importance of seeking help when we need it. They remind us that asking for support is not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength.
Right. There are so many different avenues for seeking support, Therapy can be a great option. It provides a safe space to process emotions and develop coping mechanisms. Support groups can offer a sense of community, understanding with others who've been through similar challenges. And of course, sometimes just reaching out to trusted friends and family can provide that support and connection we need.
I think the podcast host's message overall is really hopeful and empowering.
I agree. It's a reminder that we actually have a lot more agency than we realize. We have the power to make choices that cultivate more peace in our lives, even when things around us feel really chaotic.
It's a journey, not a destination, as they say.
Exactly. And each step we take brings us closer to that inner peace.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Soul Space, what really resonated with you? What stood out?
I think the biggest thing was just the reminder that peace is a journey. It's not about reaching this perfect state of stillness. It's more about cultivating that inner resilience to navigate life's ups and downs with grace and being present.
It's not about getting it right all the time, right?
Exactly.
It's about those small steps we take each day and just, making choices that support our well-being.
What are some things you think people could do? Like one small step they could take today to cultivate more peace?
Well, I mean, we talked about the breathing exercises,
Right.
creating a peace ritual, just taking some time for yourself, even setting those boundaries.
Yeah, I love that idea of peace rituals.
Me too. And I also really appreciated how the host emphasized that peace isn't selfish. It's like when we find that peace within ourselves, it radiates outward, and it creates a more harmonious, compassionate world around us.
Thinking about all this, it kind of brings to mind this thought-provoking question. If peace is the quiet between the notes, what music is playing in your life right now?
Oh, wow. I love that. It really makes you think about all the different things that make up our lives, right? Like, what are the melodies and rhythms that are shaping our experiences? And how can we create more space for that, for that peace and quiet in between?
And remember, you have the power to create that peace.
Yes.
It's a journey, it's not a destination.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into soul space and exploring how we can find peace even in the midst of chaos.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation.
And until next time, we hope you find those moments of peace and joy in your everyday lives.